Hey everybody, this is Matthew Soltesiak and you're listening to Not the Same Old Lions podcast. Using my sportscasting background, I speak with a variety of guests and interview key players to gain more insight on what makes this team go. As the Detroit Lions enter a new gritty era, we'll look beyond just the kneecaps when it comes to the analysis. Welcome to another episode. In this episode, we take a look back at the Detroit Lions season opening matchup with the Kansas City Chiefs. Yes, folks, we are going to discuss the victory. We'll also touch on what went well, turning points in the game, concerns and takeaways, as well as any other major storylines coming out of this game. Let's get to it, Lions fans.
This is Corey Schlesinger, and you are listening to Not the Same Old Lions podcast.
I'm joined today by James Cook, senior sports writer for the Traverse City Record Eagle. You can also hear him on the Get Around podcast. That drops on Mondays. James, as always, it's great to have you here.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you, man, for having me on.
I got to say, I wanted to record an immediate reaction to this game, but I don't know how much of voice I had left at that point. I don't know how much you had left. I have been looking forward to doing this show with you. The excitement everywhere leading up to this game was crazy. I mean, you and I caught that first quarter together. We were out in town. Lots of Lions fans out there. Great atmosphere. Parking was even more difficult than I expected. I mean, what did you take away from just the moments leading up to that game?
Yeah, well, you and I watched the game from a local establishment, we'll say, and that place was packed. I mean, they had the sound on the TVs, which was great. You know, a lot of times people have the TV on but not have the sound on, so everybody, including local businesses, is getting on the Lions bandwagon, I think. Yeah, I mean, that game, from what I saw on TV and posts on social media and stuff like that, the Lions fans showed up pretty well in a state that's quite a long ways away from here.
They did. They traveled well, and that is the first time since 2017 that the Lions have won their season opener. They won 21-20 over Kansas City. This is going to be a fun show.
Yeah, and I hope that applies to the season. Like this show, like the season is going to be fun.
Well, let's start with what we liked. All right. I want to start by talking about the defense. That is something I liked. Now, it wasn't perfect by any means. I think if we put that out there right away, the Lions have even said there's a lot of things that can be fixed up here. But defense, what I liked was tackling. We saw some great tackling in this game. I mean, it was, I believe, the first drive of the game, maybe the second, but I thought it was the first. John Kaminsky tackles Patrick Mahomes on a third down play, like by his ankle. And if he doesn't get him, Mahomes makes a first down and that drive keeps going.
Yeah, you didn't see a lot of broken tackles by the Chiefs in that game, which is something that as Lions fans we've gotten used to seeing on the defense is broken tackles, missed tackles, guys going solely for the strip when they should just be wrapping the guy up, get him wrapped up and then try to punch the ball out, that kind of thing, or make sure somebody else has him wrapped up before you punch the ball out, and those kind of things. And you didn't see that in this game. It was fundamental tackling. You let that second guy coming in try to be the one to punch the ball out. First guy gets him wrapped up. Second guy can go over the ball then. And it was just some pretty good fundamental defense from the Lions. And like had talked about before, they moved things around. They played people all over the place, with Branch and Gardner Johnson. I mean, I'm on the re-signed CJ Gardner Johnson to an extension right now bandwagon.
Yeah, I can get behind that one. I mean, before the season started, I was like, this might be a smart guy to bring back long term. There's no might in that anymore. It is, let's get it done. And hey, why don't we do it tomorrow while we're at it?
Yeah, and he seems to also just love being in Detroit. I mean, he seems to be all on board and just behind this team and wanting to be part of that turnaround.
So staying with the defense, I've got like a whole bunch of notes on the defense that I just liked. So Jack Campbell had a huge breakup with a dive. Like he dove and just knocked the ball away before the Kansas City Chief receiver had a chance to catch it or drop it, whatever he was going to do. He didn't allow it to happen. And then I think it was just 2 plays later, like right after that play, I put something out on Twitter. I put it in the universe. I was like, okay, Lions, we could use a stop here or an interception. So could we get an interception or a stop? And if you go look at the timestamp on Twitter, it was about 26 seconds later. Brian Branch got that interception, and that was a game-changing play because the Lions were trailing 14-7 at that point. Our offense wasn't doing a whole lot at that moment, and the defense came up with a big play. And I don't care if Kadarius Toney popped it up in the air. You still got to catch the ball, and you still got to run it all the way back.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people joking about how Kadarius Toney was the Lions MVP on Thursday, and he did have a couple of big drops. He had that one in the interception. Mahomes threw it to a pretty good place. He threw it to his hands out at shoulder level. Toney should have had that.
Totally.
One thing I pointed out on a Lions message board, if you look at those passes, they are shoulder high, and that's what can happen on those shoulder high passes. If you look at Jared Goff's throws on those timing routes coming across the middle, they are waist high. If the receiver doesn't get it, nobody else is. Amon-Ra St. Brown in that catch. I think there was a Laporta one, maybe a Josh Reynolds one. Those were all at the waist, still with their hands, but at waist and stomach level. And that ball is not going to get deflected in the air if the receiver drops it.
And that's a change we've seen with Jared Goff in the second half of last year. Was his passes started going lower. We didn't see as many going high, which significantly decreased his interception amount. And we've seen him going on quite a historic run right now. He's number 3 all time for that. Sticking with that defense, though, that breakup by Campbell is huge because how many times in the past have we seen a Lions defender get beat by just an inch? It's just a smidge, and that play happens. So breaking that up allowed the interception to happen. The run plays in the second half, the Lions held Kansas City to 0-7 on third downs. And there was one play in the second half. Mahomes scrambled for 9 yards. It was 2nd and 1. And then the Lions held them to a field goal, 3rd and 2, 4th and 2. Stuff like that was awesome. So those are my big takeaways right well on the defense. Again, the great tackling, the 0 for 7 on third in the second half. Anything else on the defense you want to hit on?
Gardner Branch and Gardner Johnson were both tremendous in the secondary. If you were watching the game with the sound on, you didn't hear Cam Sutton's name all game pretty much, which is great for a starting corner. It means they weren't even throwing his way. His guy was not open, and he wasn't involved in the play, even though that's tremendously involved in the play.
Exactly. You hardly heard it. There was just a couple of times, and he had a solid game.
Yeah, and when you get Mosley back, and maybe next week, maybe a week after that, then that secondary is going to just be even better.
I guess one last thing out for defense is we rebounded. You brought up Cam Sutton. There was that pass interference play, and it was close. It was close, but they called it. The Lions didn't crumble. They stopped and held them to a field goal. So, and that was obviously, you see all the final score, monumental that they were able to do that. Another thing I want to turn to that I really liked was the Detroit Lions' aggressive nature. Now, I was expecting some aggressiveness. I even said in the previous episode, the game preview, we might see a trick play. And you saw my reaction when that trick play happened. I jumped out of my seat. It did happen, but it didn't happen the way I thought it would. Inside your own 20-yard line. Dan Campbell has guts. At 4th and 2 from your own 17 in the first quarter of the opening game of the season on the road against the defending Super Bowl champs. That is a gutsy call. And I was just going crazy that they actually did it, and then it worked.
Yeah. And doing it with Jalen Reeves-Maben, a linebacker back there blocking, who's your blocking back in the punt formation. Chiefs didn't suspect a thing. Maybe if it had been Kabinda back there, maybe you start suspecting something. You are a little bit more suspicious that something would happen. But a linebacker being back there, and then that was a game changer. They went on that long drive after that. They scored the touchdown. They got ahead early. So I think that changed a lot. Mentally.
Well, it did, because they were going to be 3 and out, two drives in a row to start the game. And like you said, that continued that drive. They went all the way down and got that touchdown. So you had the score on the board. And so that was really big. The other thing was going forward on 4th and 2 late in the game at the Kansas City 45. I like the aggressiveness. Now, the Lions did not get that. but it also showed the confidence that Campbell has in the offense, and it showed the confidence he had in his defense to stop them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because he's basically saying, if we don't get this, I'm confident that our defense can stop them. We don't need an extra. What do we gain? Maybe 30 yards on a punt there, because Fox isn't going to be able to give it a full kick. So maybe you get them pinned back at the 15 or 20. So it's not a gigantic gain there. So I wasn't surprised when they went for that at all. I was more surprised when the Chiefs went for it on 4th and 25 at the end of the game, when they had 3 timeouts and the 2-minute warning still. That just tells me that the Chiefs didn't think they could stop the Lions run game, and that the Lions could just run the clock out, just pound ball with David Montgomery 3 times and get a first down, and the game's over. So that tells me a lot of Andy Reid's thinking.
Well, I think that you hit the nail on the head, because a lot of people were confused about that. And it was like, he didn't think that they would get the ball back. And you know what? They went for it. They didn't get it. And guess what happened? They didn't get the ball back. So he was actually right. And David Montgomery might not have had tons of flashy plays in this game, but he made plays. He worked hard. I mean, his 8-yard touchdown run was pretty flashy if you really looked at how well he ran that thing.
That was a great run.
And a great block by that rookie tight end, Sam Laporta.
Yeah, Laporta was somebody who really stood out on offense, I think, this week. I mean, his numbers weren't huge, but he caught every pass that was thrown his way. And he was a better blocker, I think, than Hawkinson was. I mean, at least one game in, he looks to be every bit of a blocker that Hawkinson was supposed to be coming out of college. And I don't know that Hawkinson turned out to be quite the blocker that he was supposed to be coming out of college. I mean, he was supposed to be George Kittle, basically. George Kittle 2.0. Laporta looks a little bit more like George Kittle 2.0 than Hawkinson does. Hawkinson's still a good blocker, but not like Kittle is. Laporta looks like he could be a great receiver and a great blocker like Kittle is.
I agree with that. That another thing I liked was all the draft picks. I mean, I liked all the guys that we had out there, whether it was Jahmyr Gibbs, and we're going to get to him in a little bit, Jack Campbell, Brian Branch, and Sam Laporta. I thought all 4 of them contributed in really good ways. Anything else that you liked that you want to point out before we look at something maybe we didn't like or we were concerned about?
I liked what Gibbs showed the times that he got the ball. I know he wasn't involved as much as people would like, but there was a reason for that.
I agree. I think there's a good reason for that, but keep going.
Yeah. But the opportunities he did get, he looked good. His balance is great. His vision's good. He can stretch a defense out. And, I think that they weren't able to unleash him in the passing game, but I think that they had a plan for that before they weren't able to do it.
Cool. We'll get to that theory of why he wasn't involved as much in just a little bit. Let's transition over to things that we didn't like or we might have concerns about or things we weren't sure of. Are there any that come to mind for you?
I was a little concerned. Marvin Jones seems to have lost a step. Like he's not the Marvin Jones that Lions fans remember. He's more the Marvin Jones that Jaguars fans remember. So I'm a little concerned there. I'm wondering if maybe they should dress Antoine Green in his place in the future, just to have a deep threat. That was one thing that they really kind of lacked in this game, was having a true deep threat. And after Gibbs kind of left the game, then that's even more so, because he could have been maybe utilized in that kind of thing. But so the wide receiver depth, I think if you add Green in there for a threat, and then, Amon-Ra St. Brown is, of course, Amon-Ra St. Brown. And then, Raymond and Reynolds are very good depth pieces there to have around. But, yeah.
I agree with you on that wide receiving core thing. Marvin Jones had a bad game, right? He had the fumble. He had at least one significant drop. He wasn't the guy we remember. We know he's not going to be. I'm not going to judge his whole season on this one game, though. But I do agree the depth at wide receiving core could be a concern. I say could, we don't know yet. I was surprised, I guess, and this could maybe even be in a part where not I didn't like, but a storyline coming out is he got a lot of snaps. He got a lot of reps, more than Khalif Raymond. And that surprised me a little bit. I thought Raymond would be involved a little bit more. We will
Yeah.
have to see what happens with this receiving core. It was game one. We didn't have a deep threat. You said it. And that allowed Kansas City to play a little bit different defense. And you saw they had a lot of presence around that line of scrimmage. They didn't play off as much because the Lions did not have that deep threat. So there's a lot of things about this receiving core to stay tuned on.
I mean, and it's also interesting to note that that is Marvin Jones's first career fumble in the NFL. And he's what, in his 11th year or something like that?
Yeah, this is like Jamal Williams' fumble in Dallas last year, right? The guy never fumbles and then it finally happens. And apparently somebody asked him in an interview the week or so leading up to the game about that stat or something. So thank you very much for that asking of the question. Here's one thing that confused me, and I don't know, maybe you can shed some light on this, but it was late in the game. The Lions were driving and they picked up about 8 or 9 yards. And then there was, maybe it was 7 yards. And then there was a holding penalty on Kansas City, and the Lions declined it. So rather than taking a 10-yard penalty and a new first down, it was a 7-yard penalty, making it 2nd and 3. All I can think of is that they were thinking this would give them one more play before they got a first down to keep the clock running. Because I thought a lot of people were like, why wouldn't you accept that? It's got to be a clock thing, right?
Yeah, I think it's just like during the Packers game when he declined a holding penalty in the Packers game, and it was the same situation where it was the play that they got created a short yardage situation, which he's pretty confident that they can convert, and it's one more play, and it's going to be a running play, so it's going to burn a timeout, which at that point is more important than accepting a 5-yard penalty.
I agree with that completely. Or 5 yards, 10 yards, because it was defensive holding. So I think it would have been 10. But I heard a lot of people talking about it, so I thought it was worth bringing up. Let's look at turning points. That fake punt was huge because the Lions went all the way down the field. And, Jahmyr Gibbs was going to show us his speed to the outside before he fell down. But fortunately, you had the next play, which was something we've been talking about for a while, which is Jared Goff to Amon-Ra St. Brown all day long. And he got the touchdown. I thought that was pretty pivotal to go down and score right there.
Mm-hmm. And that's another one of those plays like I was talking about. He hit him on that crosser, and he hit him right in the waist. So it's like so you can't have happen to him what happened to Tony, because if Amon-Ra St. Brown drops the ball, which he very rarely does, it's going to go straight into the ground. I mean, the interesting thing that a lot of people were talking about during and after the game was the whole Jawan Taylor motion and all that stuff, and they were like, why are the Lions not bugging the referees to call this? And there was a lot of talk after the game that the reason why they weren't is because Taylor's set was tipping plays. He would set his feet different, whether it was a run or pass play.
So that's why the Lions weren't complaining about it, because they were learning something or using something from it.
Yeah, so they were going to continue to let him commit false starts that weren't called. But then it did get called that one time very late in the game, which made it 4th and 25 instead of 4th and 20 when the Chiefs went for it. But if you go back and look at the tape, he is setting up different. He sets up, where he had the right leg, way back and was kind of like flinching it.
Yeah.
And stuff. That was his giveaway that it was a pass play. And when his right leg wasn't as back as far like that, it was a giveaway that it was a run play.
Well, that's a big storyline coming out of this one, because a lot of people were texting about it. It was all over social media, and they were like, what's going on? Why aren't they calling it? Why aren't the Lions yelling about it on the sideline? Well, apparently they had something else up their sleeve.
And the interesting thing also is that the refs should have been flagging that not for illegal motion, like that he was moving early, but they should have called it for illegal formation, because he was lining up so far back that he wasn't on the line of scrimmage anymore. And so it's just an illegal formation. So it should just be the play gets stopped and you get penalized 5 yards and do it again.
Yeah. And I guess he had a reputation for this in Jacksonville. I think he came from Jacksonville last year and had a reputation for lining up kind of like that as well. Another major storyline coming out of this, our draft pick contributions. It's got to be, because a lot of people have been critical, have questioned the draft picks. The top 4 guys all contributed at a huge level.
Yeah. I think every one of those draft analysts who were questioning what Brad Holmes was doing on draft day in the first 2 rounds should have to recant something now.
I agree.
and so they come out of that draft with four starters, four immediate starters, and a developmental quarterback who probably would have been a first round pick if he had been healthy.
And those are four starters on a team that's pretty good already.
Yeah. Yeah.
So then let's go to Jahmyr Gibbs. I want to hear your thoughts on his workload, and then I'll weigh in on some of mine, and we'll see where we meet.
Well, supposedly on one of the carries that he had, when he was hit, he burst a blood vessel in one of his eyes. And that is why his playing time really diminished after that. It's not considered a long-term thing. It's not that he'll be able to play next week and everything, but I'm guessing that it probably would cause maybe some blurry vision or something temporarily, at least until the body starts healing itself. It's not a thing that you need to get fixed. The body will do it itself.
Wow, I did not hear that. I didn't even know about that even a couple days later. Wow. Because, yeah, I noticed the same thing you did, which was they weren't using him as much as some thought. And I'm thinking in hindsight, maybe it shouldn't have been a total shock, not even looking at the injury, but David Montgomery is solid, and he's a veteran. Do you remember that season opening game about, 3-4 years ago? And the Lions had a chance to win the game, and the rookie running back dropped the pass in the end zone when they had Adrian Peterson on the roster. And a lot of people are like, Adrian Peterson should have been in there instead of DeAndre Swift. You don't put a rookie in that situation in the first game. I'm not saying Jahmyr Gibbs is going to operate the way DeAndre Swift is, but you also trust a veteran a little bit more than a rookie, no matter how good that rookie is. And David Montgomery is a great guy to lean on. So I thought maybe that may have played into it as well.
I think it probably did. I mean, especially because late in the game, in a close game, you're going to run the ball a little bit more. If you get a lead, you're going to run the ball a little bit more. And we know Dan Campbell loves to just pound the ball. He's got the offensive line to do it. So you give a very good running back like David Montgomery a good offensive line. I mean, you saw how efficient and good he was with the Bears the last few years behind a pretty poor offensive line overall. And now you put one of the probably top 5 lines in the NFL in front of him, and you saw what he can do. I mean, he can grind a game out in the fourth quarter.
Exactly, and that is huge. That is huge having that talent. Another thing coming out of this is people were saying Kansas City had a lot of drops, and that's the thing. I'm sorry, but I don't feel bad about that. No Lions fan should ever feel bad about that. We have lived that for years in our own history, and you need receivers that can catch the ball. Our team was not perfect with that, so no excuses with that. I do have to ask you about another comment that was made coming out of this, though. The asterisk comment. Have you heard that? Or have you heard about that? Mike Tirico talking about, the Lions won, but there is an asterisk with it. Kelsey and Jones were not there. Now, we talked about this before the game even happened. As soon as we heard there was an injury to Kelsey, I'm like, you know what they're going to say if we win this? They didn't play. Now, in fairness to Mike Tirico, he said a lot of good things about the Lions, but he put that out there, and that's something a lot of Lions fans held on to. I got together with a bunch of old friends this past weekend, and that's the thing I heard is, what's this asterisk thing? Like, it bothered a lot of people, and you've heard it throughout. What is your take on that?
It doesn't bother me at all. I think, Tirico is a guy who's from Ann Arbor. So he has Michigan roots. I think he said that as much as anything to not be seen as a homer, because he was saying a lot of good things about the Detroit Lions during the game. So I think that he just kind of wanted to walk it back and say, hey, I'm being impartial here. I'm not rooting for my home state team. And that's all I took it as, and that's what people want to say, and let him say it. He also just kind of handed Dan Campbell bulletin board material and did the Lions a favor.
I agree. The comment didn't bother me. Actually I found more interesting is if you were to go back and rewatch the broadcast, I want to know how many times they mentioned Kelsey and Jones not being in the game. And I want you to count that and then go and ask yourself, how many times did they say Jamison Williams is not in this game? Now, don't get me wrong. Kelsey's a Hall of Famer and an all-pro currently. Jones is an all-pro. Jamison Williams is not in that category. But Jamison Williams is in that category of elite potential. And so when he comes
and a
back,
first round draft pick.
yeah, a
Yeah.
first round draft pick. And when he does come back, there is a lot of possibilities with him. And so they didn't bring that up. I mean, do you remember hearing much about that?
No, I didn't hear much about that. I didn't hear much about Emmanuel Mosley not playing in the game, and he's a starting cornerback. So the Lions were missing 2 starters as well.
Yeah. So again,
everybody has injuries. Everybody has, well, I mean, Chris Jones is a self-inflicted injury. Gray played really well. So I don't know, how much difference does Kelsey make in that game?
I don't know. But the other thing that would bother me a lot is Chris Jones is in the stadium watching the game. Like, I mean, there is just a weird whole thing around that, man, if I'm a Kansas City fan, I'm a little frustrated right now knowing I lost a 1-point game and the guy was in the stadium watching the game in the suite. And I'm not judging, but I'm like, why aren't the owners helping make this happen? Like, I don't know. I'm negotiating to the 11th hour to get the contract done to get the guy on the field.
Yeah, they should. I mean, he is one of the best defensive tackles in the league. He's not quite Aaron Donald, but he's not a big step behind. So he's one of those guys that should be getting paid. He is getting pretty good money already. He just wants to get a bump. But he's already taken millions of dollars in fines for what he's missed in the offseason and these games, missing game checks and stuff. So, I mean, the longer that he holds out, the more he's got to get out of this to just break even.
For sure. And, the other really big takeaway has to be is, if you really look at this, you had the Marvin Jones fumble. You had Brock Wright running, and that caused a fumble, but we recovered it. But the Lions did not play their best game, but still won. And, in the past, if you played a team like Kansas City, you had to play error-free. Our offense has a lot to improve on, and I think they're going to, but the first game was in a tough environment, and I think they're going to expand on that offense. But they won the game without being perfect.
Yeah, you saw 1 or 2 not great snaps from Frank Ragnow. The one that hits right when he's in motion, that throws away a play and loses you yards. So I don't know if that was Ragnow's fault, if that was Wright's fault, if he didn't motion early enough or something. But that was kind of a big play too, because I mean that was a loss of yards and a down. The Marvin Jones fumble, there was things for the Lions to overcome in this game.
And we'll have to see how the secondary does, because there were some guys who were open that made some catches for Kansas City early, and then there were some times they weren't open, they got covered, but then there were some times that Kansas City dropped some. So we're going to have to see. I'm expecting the secondary to get better, the communication to improve, but it's nice to know, again, that we don't have to play a perfect game and we can win a game.
Mm-hmm.
So fans everywhere, we talked about that going into the game, coming out of the game. Oh my goodness, everybody was celebrating this. If you were on social media, you saw it everywhere. You at work the next day, people are wearing Detroit Lions jerseys. You're seeing flags out being posted that got Detroit Lions country on it. People talking about the team. I mean, did you witness some of this too, I'm sure?
Oh yeah. I was wearing a Lions shirt on Saturday when I was out covering a volleyball tournament, and I had one of the coaches come up to me and say, "Nice shirt."
Nice. I mean,
you don't get that. You never got that in years past wearing Lions attire.
No, you didn't. I mean, it goes back to a thing that Lomas Brown once told me during an interview. He was like, at one point it was you'd go out to dinner and stuff and people wouldn't talk to you, or if they did, it was like, hey, what went wrong or whatnot. And now he said he loves going out to dinner because everybody's so excited about the team. I mean, again, I've been on the bandwagon, I think I told you, since the late 1980s, and I've just never stopped watching. And, that win in Green Bay, it got the hype train moving. And it turned it from the Polar Express, because that's what people had to see it to believe it, to the real deal. There's no mistake. This is a real deal. But now comes that hard part, James. We've got to continue to meet expectations, right? We've all had that great day at work, but can you turn one day into 2 great days, then 3, then maybe 4?
Yeah. That's the thing, is they're going to get expectations. Going into next week with Seattle, they're going to have nice 10 days to prepare for that game, so they can sit back at their house and watch the Seahawks game live and start prepping early and all that. But that Seahawks game last year was a shootout.
Oh, it was.
I think that was the 48-45.
Yeah.
I think it ended up being, and now they've got Jackson Smith and Jigma, so they've got one more weapon on offense. They've got Charbonnet at running back.
They will have their work cut out for them. But before we even get to that game, man, what an amazing opening weekend for football. We had like extra days to celebrate and be happy because we were the only team that played. We played early. And if you're late to the party, don't worry. There is plenty of room on the train. So get on board because we are not the same old Lions. And in fact, if you listened, I got to give Mike Tirico a shout out for this. As a fellow Syracuse graduate, he even said it. Take a listen right here.
Not the same old Lions, the 1-0 Lions. They come in to Kansas City on opening night and beat the champs.
So you hear that? We are not the same old Lions. We are the 1-0 Lions. Maybe with the Hard Knocks bump from last year, maybe we're the new America's team. Because, maybe we just need a little change and move it from the Southwest to the Midwest.
Yeah, I can totally see them being that popular team. I mean, they still nationally have the underdog mentality. Everybody considers them an underdog, even if the expectations start coming. Detroit's the underdog that everybody can kind of get behind. So I can totally see that.
All right, James. Well, we're about to wrap up here. Any final thoughts on this first opening season win since 2017?
The one thing that you're crossing your fingers on is that offensive line stays healthy. Ragnow's got the thing with his foot that's still going on and is going to be, I guess, a concern probably the rest of his career. You hope that Vaitai doesn't have a setback. He looked good in that game. And then after the game, Taylor Decker was in a boot.
Yes, he was.
I think it's a precautionary thing because he played the whole game and was never really limping or doing anything like that. So I'm thinking it's maybe a similar thing where it's like what Ragnow has, where it's just something to make sure that something doesn't get worse,
Awesome. Well, this game was everything we needed it to be. A 1-point victory. A win is a win. And now we just have to do our best to not overreact. Everyone's going to overreact to everything that happens in week one. You're going to see an overreaction to whatever happens in the Rams versus the Seahawks game. And so we won't really know until we get to next week what next week looks like. James, thank you so much for joining the show today. This was a lot of fun. I look forward to doing this all year long.
I hope so. I hope we can be this optimistic every week.
Me as well. Folks, thank you so much for tuning in. You can find all the episodes at notthesameoldlions.com. If you have any questions you'd like us to answer about the Lions, about the show, email me, Matthew at notthesameoldlions.com. If you're listening on YouTube, please hit that like button. And while you're at it, tell your friends about the show. Subscribe regardless of your listening platform. And until next time, stay gritty, my friends.